Radar Plex 3.
Risk is a constant. It's something to embrace and manage. When the pressure is on, I feel right at home. How do you manage risk?
CME Group, where risk meets opportunity.
Equity indices built on opinions? That's the old way. The new way is...
Everything is just faster.
This is the Asia Trade. I'm April Hong in Singapore. I'm Heidi Straggles in Sydney. The top stories this hour. The surge in energy prices easing as President Trump says the U.S. will provide insurance and military escorts if needed for shipping in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. As strikes continue across Iran and across the region, Trump says the new leadership in Tehran may be no better than the old one, adding to questions over U.S. objectives. Also ahead, leaders of Wall Street's biggest private markets. Players warn that investors have reason to be concerned amid a wave of withdrawals.
And I'm Stephen Engel in Beijing, where China's most important political gatherings are about to begin. Officials will unveil the 15th five-year plan, including a goal to spur a significant increase in consumption.
Investors will be keenly awaiting any news headlines coming from that pageantry and political progress going on in China, as we'll get those updates. But at the moment, we are watching ahead of that open of major markets across the region, including some news out of Korea. At the moment, we are getting industrial output data, seeing a decline of almost 2%, actually 1.9% month on month. An estimate was for a gain of 0.5%. When it comes to industrial output on a year-on-year basis, we're seeing rise of 7.1%. That is better than expectations of the 3.2% increase there. January cyclical leading index also rising by 0.7 points there on a month-on-month basis. We have seen, of course, really Asian stocks in particular, some of those tech and AI names trading in the likes of the Korean markets, seeing some gains amidst a broader market sell-off. But it does look like we are seeing a sort of broader shakes as we get into the start of trading in Asia, set to slip as we see oil extending that rally, with the promises and assurances being given by the U.S. administration when it comes to at least the transportation of oil tankers through those key straits. But we are seeing Asian stocks looking to track Wall Street lower. That late rebound in the US session really trimming a broader sell-off there. Oil will be one to focus. We'll be looking at energy stocks in particular when it comes to trading here in Australia. For Aussie stocks, though, we have seen really that improvement in February earnings, signalling what is being called a powerful boost for Australian stocks, and potentially a little bit of an opportunity for diversification for global investors here, April.
Yeah, Heidi, we certainly saw that really, really worrying sell-off in South Korea just a day ago. For now, look at markets, U.S. assets trading the headline as Trump said that the U.S. would escort, insure tankers and other vessels through the strait. We're seeing how oil and gas paired those gains as Trump gave those assurances. Stocks, bonds, they also paired losses, but semiconductors, they were the drag. We even saw oil and gas names part of the sell-off. And it was interesting how even gold wasn't spared. Now let's get straight to the White House and bring in our correspondent, Tyler Kendall. Tyler, we're hearing these assurances from the U.S. president. What details are we getting on them?
Well, April, I was actually in the Oval Office today with President Trump, where he actually downplayed the potential for long-term impacts in the oil market. But at the same time, once us reporters left the room, he then posted on Truth Social this bid to help stave off a potential energy crisis due to what's happening in the region. Now, as you mentioned, President Trump said that we would see these U.S.-backed insurance guarantees, as well as the U.S. Navy potentially escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz, as we got a statement just earlier today from the IRGC via our Iranian state media warning that no vessels should pass through the critical waterway. Now, President Trump says that the insurance would be offered through the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation at a, quote, very reasonable price, but did not elaborate on the mechanism that would be offered. People familiar with the matter do tell us here at Bloomberg News that concerns were raised about insurers putting upward pressure on oil prices as insurance contracts were getting pulled. Of course, it's going to be one to watch, including when or if the U.S. Navy does ultimately escort these ships. President Trump says that he'd like to see that happen, quote, as soon as possible.
The comments from the president when it comes to the prospect of new leadership, or perhaps just a new iteration of the old leadership, are really quite interesting, right? Do we have more of a insight into what the U.S. objectives are here?
Well, President Trump said today that the worst possible potential outcome would be if new leadership in Iran was, quote, just as bad as the regime that the U.S. and Israel are ultimately trying to change. We heard President Trump saying that he hopes that a new, more moderate leader would emerge that the U.S. feels that it can work with going forward. Though, of course, we have also heard from the president that the Iranian people should take over their government. It's, of course, a very fluid situation. This administration has outlined various goals, including, of course, they want to see a complete dismantling of Iran's nuclear program, a takedown of Iran's ballistic missile program, but then also ending its support for proxy militia groups in the region. President Trump did mention that some of his top candidates, in his words, that he felt the U.S. government could work with were ultimately killed in U.S. strikes. So it's going to be something to watch going forward.
Tyler, also watching as the U.S. conflict with Iran is well underway and drags on, the extent to which this is going to affect its relations with EU partners, including with Spain. What's the latest on that front?
Well, President Trump today said that he was going to cut off all of trade with Spain after apparently Spain did not allow the U.S. to use its military bases as part of this military operation against Iran. Now, it's not totally clear how this would happen. Of course, Spain is part of the broader trading partnership with the European Union, but the president did go on to say that he could impose a, quote, full embargo on goods from Spain. We're still waiting for additional details there, but it's definitely highlighting fissures between the U.S. and Spain, which we know had been sort of heightening, right? Spain's prime minister had pushed back against President Trump's stated goal that he'd like to see NATO partners boost their GDP to spending to that 5% target. And we have the German chancellor in the Oval Office today, too, who actually seems to defend President Trump on this issue, saying that other EU and NATO partners have been urging Spain to boost its defense spending as well.
Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall there with the latest. Let's get some more analysis with our next guest, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Yemen and spent over 30 years in the U.S. Foreign Service, focused on the Arabian Peninsula and the Persian Gulf. Barbara Bodine is now a director and distinguished professor of practice of diplomacy at Georgetown University. Barbara, really great to have you with us, and appreciate you sharing these insights with us today. Where are we at when it comes to the strategic planning for the rest of this war? We know that the US, the last thing that they want is another forever war, but there doesn't seem to be an end point when it comes to the administration or the president's objectives here.
I honestly don't think that there has been any strategic planning for the day after, or possibly even the day of the start of this conflict. There's no real evidence that intelligence was used to its fullest.
AI is transforming entire industries, from automation to cloud computing. McKinsey
was used to its fullest extent in understanding what the situation in Iran was, or second order ramifications. And so I really think that we are kind of making this up as we go along. The president says that we're going to escort and insure tankers. That should have been part of the planning. That should have been could have been forecast and should have been planned. So I'm not really seeing anything strategic. I'm seeing ad hoc, make it up as you go along, hope that it works out. But we're not even getting very clear signals on what the end game is. We have at least 3 or 4 different end games, and they can't all be run simultaneously, and some of them actually operate in conflict with each other. So I don't know. Sorry. I wish I had the answer. I don't.
I think we all wish someone had the answer at this point. But we had some interesting remarks, some doubt being cast by the president today, saying that there is the chance that the new leadership could be just as hardline as the old leadership. Right? We also know that Israel struck a top Iranian leadership meeting where they were meeting apparently to elect a new successor. When the president says whatever it takes, what do you believe that to mean at this point? Does it mean eventually greater U.S. involvement on the ground?
Well, no one has ever done a successful regime change from 35,000 feet. It does take planning and work on the ground, but it takes more than just boots on the ground. And I'm not entirely sure that the president is willing to pay the political price for putting boots on the ground in another war in that region. A good set of analysts would have explained to the president that removing the supreme leader and certainly removing most of the rest of the leadership is going to create a vacuum. Iran could slide into chaos. It could end up with a military dictatorship, somebody coming out of the IRGC. I think the possibility near term of a moderate leader coming to power who would be willing and able to agree to all of the president's demands, including total denuclearization, the end of the missile program, and support for proxies. I don't think that is a realistic endgame, certainly not near term.
What are the immediate risks in this conflict as there's a power vacuum, to your point, in the Iranian leadership? How much more dangerous has this all made the situation?
I think the vacuum is extraordinarily dangerous. Politics do not love a vacuum any better than nature does. And there's going to be jockeying for position. The guys with the guns tend to win those kinds of fights. And it could be a series of interim governments, none of them with real authority, certainly not to negotiate. And I don't think we have seen the beginning of the power struggle, much less be able to forecast when it will be over. I think it's important to note that there is culturally, religiously, 40 days of mourning, which means 40 days from the death of the supreme leader. There will be an uptick in violence and probably in the whole succession issue. So this is going to take some time. This is going to take a very long time.
How committed would you say the U.S. is? I mean, we keep coming back to this question about how long this is going to last. We have been getting suggestions that the U.S. hand was forced in some ways by Israel. Does it speak to the level of commitment we can actually be expecting in the next couple of weeks and beyond this 40 days, as you suggest?
Right. That I think is a critical question, is how much persistence and focus will remain on Iran. The idea that we went to war in the region and put our allies and friends at risk because Israel was going to do something anyway, and we were going to be, the backlash was going to hit us anyway, so we got ahead of it, which is what Secretary Rubio said, is a stunning comment. this is not an administration that is known for long-term focus and persistence on details. And how long they will be able to last, how long they will stay. We also have an issue, and this gets to your question of our persistence, is we have an issue with munitions. And we will have to pull munitions away from Ukraine, from Asia, from other places. And so we've got munitions, we've got political will. We don't know what the public reaction is going to be. A lot of Trump's core supporters voted for him because they wanted an end to wars in the Middle East, not the start of a new one. We don't know what's going to happen to oil prices. So, and I think something that I think the president has been rather callous about is there are going to be casualties. And that is going to drive home to a lot of Americans that we are not just striking Iran, we are in a war. And a lot of Americans don't want that. I don't know how long we will be able to stay. I don't take the president's statements at face value for reflecting policy or considered judgment.
Emphasize again, it is free to join my community. The stocks I share are also free. The techniques and strategies I teach are also free. So please don't ask me if I charge a fee.
At face value for reflecting policy or considered judgment.
But we're getting updates now from the IDF saying that they're targeting Iranian launch sites and aerial defense systems in a broad wave of attacks targeting Iran beginning now. I'm curious about this multiple front situation that's opened up, right? Because a number of the targets for Iran have never been direct adversaries or indirect military confrontation. What is the strategy here? Is it and how much does it really strain, the security guarantees, the diplomatic relationships in that region with the U.S.?
First of all, I don't think there's a strategy. I'm not sure that there was a thinking through of the full ramifications for our partners and our allies among the Arab Gulf states in particular. And the ferocity with which Iran has been targeting the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia, the GCC states, not just our military facilities, their economic facilities, major ports, processing plants, and also commercial residential areas and hotels. And this really does call into question, what we will be able to do to protect our friends and allies. I will say that one of the reactions has been from most of the GCC states that I've heard from is that they had been working to have a constructive relationship with Iran to try to stabilize the Gulf. They all need that waterway to be open and free, not just for oil and gas to get out, which is how we look at it, but they get 80% of their food through the straits as well. And so there's a very strong feeling that Iran has betrayed their trust and their relationships and their abilities to have a stable relationship. But how exactly this is going to play out, are they going to feel that we drag them into this position, or are they going to be looking to us to help them secure their territory, their assets, and most importantly, their people?
Barbara, it's interesting also to your point, maybe the calculus for Iran is to exert more pressure on these Gulf states so that they in turn exert pressure on the U.S. to end this conflict. It's been great to get your insights. Thank you. Barbara Bodine is former U.S. ambassador to Yemen and director and distinguished professor in the practice of diplomacy at Georgetown University. Now coming up, we speak exclusively to DFI Retail Group Chief Executive Scott Price after their swing back to full-year profit. And of course, we'll have more on the market impact of the Iran war. This is Bloomberg.
Have an amazing day today. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for all the blessings in our lives. Thank you, Heavenly Father. For
Risk assets found some semblance of relief after President Trump assured that the U.S. would escort and insure tankers and other vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, easing somewhat fears of a major global supply shock. Let's get to our Bloomberg and Las Vegas, Brendan Fagan in New York. So, Brendan, does this change the narrative, given that we are still waiting for details on how this would potentially work?
Laboratory grown gem.
I do think it's a major positive. I think you're looking at one big trade across the board here. The equity trade is an oil trade. So if there is anything that can ease the boil in oil, we saw a 9% gain pair pretty aggressively earlier today. So if Trump does get away with these guarantees and bring in the Navy to guide ships, I think that definitely helps the risk tape. But more broadly, that once we get through this episode, we're just going to go back to the thoughts of an AI bubble, private credit focus. So it does help, but there's still certainly clouds on the horizon.